Hi, this is Chetan. We're just waiting for people to join in. In the meantime, we also have the chat open. If you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself, chat a little bit about of what you're interested in this session, we can talk about that as well. Sorry, we're having a little bit of an issue with our YouTube thing again. So Namrata is pointing everybody to the... Can you all hear me, by the way? Can someone confirm if you can hear me? Yeah, can you all hear me now? Can you hear me, Namrata? All right, I can't hear you.
You're audible. Yeah, you're audible.
All right.
We all can hear you. They are all in the comments also. They've replied. They can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Yeah, I can see people now. So while we're waiting for folks to join in, I can give you a bit of a sense of this place. That's a fire that's lit because I'm in the Himalayas and it's about 3 degrees outside and it'll probably go to 1 in the middle of the night. But we'll talk about writing. We don't have to talk about the weather. In the meantime, if anybody has questions or if anybody wants to put something particular, you can share that in the chat and then we'll get started in a couple of minutes. Sorry about this back and forth. A bit. YouTube threw something unexpected at us, which we hadn't seen before. So a bit of an issue there. But we're on now, so that's the good news. So should we start, Namrata? Should we wait for another couple of minutes? What do you think?
We still have people coming in, Chetan. I think we can wait for a couple of more minutes. We still have people joining.
Sure. Sounds good. We are recording this, so we will be sharing the recording on YouTube as well once we're done. The folks who have joined so far, if you can tell me a little bit about yourself on the chat, that would be very interesting. Are there any career writers here? Are there any people here who are full-time writers who do writing for a living? Or are there any people who are already published? My biggest question is actually about the form. So are you mostly long form writers or short form writers? That will be very helpful for us.
I am already a published writer, Chetan. Hi.
So, okay, yeah.
I am Kasturika and my name is not appearing here.
Okay.
I'll just rename myself.
Can everyone just mute yourself because I'm picking up a lot of background noise. Yeah, all right. So Dr. Amrita is saying she's been blogging since 2014. There's one more new message. While we were waiting for people to show up, should I do a quick intro of myself? I don't know how much people know me or how familiar they are with my work so far. Or we just wait another 2 minutes, maybe then everybody can get that input. So Namrita, I'll wait for your cue because you're managing the YouTube stream as well.
Yeah,
Whenever you tell me, we'll get started.
sure. I think it would be great to have your introduction, Chetan, and also a bit about the Himalayan Writing Retreat because I see a lot of new names here. So it might
Okay.
just be helpful, yeah. Then after that, we can start, I guess, because we already have like 13, 14 people who are waiting there have already joined here.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. So for those who are not familiar, the Himalayan Writing Retreat um, is a physical place. We are actually in the Himalayas, so it's not just a brand name. We're a small learning center. We're a learning retreat in the mountains, and people come here for two reasons. People come here to learn, and people come here to write. So some will come for workshops, for learning events like this one, which is physical. The learning events tend to be 3 days, 4 days long, and there's a list of them on our website. And people who come to just write are people who just want to get away from their everyday lives and have a separate place where it's quiet and it's natural and green and inspiring. And then they come here to write. I used to be in the corporate world for about 20 years. Um, Towards the tail end of those 20 years, I landed up in jail for a month. And while I was in jail, there's nothing to do. After you figured out that you won't get beat and nothing crazy will happen to you, there's nothing to do. So I was, it was a case against my employer. It was a bit of a mistake. But any case, while I was there, I sat down and, they take away your laptop, they take away your phone. You have no friends. So the only thing you can do is read and you can write. So I started writing about everything that I saw around me. This was in Jharkhand, Bokaro. So the and and so the whole diary pretty much that I wrote over that 1 month was the description of the people inside the prison. It was the description of what goes on inside the prison, the economy of the prison, and so on and so forth. And so when I came out, this was in 2013. I had two notebooks full of my writing that were with me. I'd never written or published anything much before that. A couple of professional articles, but that's pretty much it. And and then when I came out, I had this kind of raw material. I had this first draft, and it was quite bad. And so I improved it a little bit, and I went to some publishers and I said, "Hey, I've got this book." So I went to Penguin, and Penguin said, "Yeah, we're interested, but this is not a book." And though I had to train myself and educate myself and understand what is a book and what is not a book, and then I improved on that manuscript and I did a lot of rework and revision, and finally it came out as a book called The Bad Boys of Bokaro Jail. So that was my first book. It was published by Penguin. After that, a lot of things happened. I rejoined the corporate world. I was very unhappy. Then I quit the corporate world. And in 2015, my whole family and I, we packed up and we moved to a village, which is where I am right now. It's a village called Satkhol in Nainital district of Uttarakhand. And while I was here, I had quit my job. I had no income, and I was trying to figure out what would I do next. And while I was figuring that out, I started writing a blog. I'm picking up a lot of background noise. So if anybody's not muted, can you please mute yourself? I don't know. Everybody shows is muted except Pratik. If Pratik you could please mute yourself. Yeah. So so that's the place where it all started, and I started writing this blog. The blog is called uncity.blog. It's still out there, although I don't write much on it anymore. And uncity.blog was where I started writing the various little things that happen in the journey from the plains to the mountains. And and it was interesting, and I kept writing, and I realized that I was really enjoying the writing process. And while I was doing all that, I was also looking for something to do, like something with which to earn a living, because I had, two school-going children, and I had a family, and I was only 44 at the time. And so I started writing, and I had this idea of this Himalayan writing retreat. I said, Himalaya is a great place to write. It's very inspiring. It's very pretty. So why don't we start this thing called the Himalayan Writing Retreat? And that's how the Himalayan Writing Retreat was born. And then, fortunately for us, Sumit Bansal turned up. Sumit Bansal is a master blogger. He's a very, very good blogger, and he quit IBM at the ripe old age of 29 because he was making so much money from blogging. He didn't need a job anymore, and so he turned up, and we started doing a blogging masterclass together. And through the blogging masterclass, we actually learned a lot about blogging as opposed to writing, which are two not not very, but there are some basic differences in the two. And so we started blogging, and we started building the Himalayan Writing Retreat blog very seriously. And that took on a whole new momentum when COVID happened because we couldn't do our workshops. So we really started investing in the blog, putting lots of effort, putting a lot of time, money into the blog. And that has now got to a point where it gets almost 50,000 hits every month. So it's grown significantly. It's quite powerful. And so that's been my journey in not in a nutshell. That was quite a long journey. But anyway, that's the background of who I am and what I do. Today, we will be talking about mainly content writing in the framework of short form nonfiction, which means if you're writing an article, if you're writing a blog post, if you're writing for, say, HuffPost or Thrive Global or someone like that, then how do you make your writing more compelling? How do you make it more interesting for the reader? So that's really going to be our focus in this session. Are there any questions? Anything that anybody wants to ask? Since it's a smaller group, we can do some Q&A, and then I'll start off on the session itself. Namrata, whenever you tell me, I can get going. Yeah, we'll
We can
start.
start this.
All right, great. So the first thing that I would talk about when we are talking about how to make writing more compelling is two things. Uh, to a process thing, they are not so much about what you write, but they are about how you write. The first is that when you write, you should focus very deep. Don't be distracted. Don't write when your email is also open and your WhatsApp is also open and five other things are going on, because then you can't really bring your whole mind and your whole focus to the writing process. So when you're writing, make sure that you're only writing and you've turned off everything else. And the easiest way to turn off everything else is called airplane mode. So if you can put airplane mode on your device, and you can set things up so that you're not distracted, you'll probably work at twice the efficiency of, you write one sentence or five sentences, and then there is a ping from WhatsApp or there is an email notification. So that's first thing about the process. The second thing about the process is developing the habit of reading, right? If you say I'm going to write, but I don't want to read, it's like saying I only want to exhale. That doesn't work. For you to be able to exhale, you have to be able to inhale. So spend time reading, invest in the reading, think of it as almost like a professional necessity. And it helps a lot. It makes a very big difference when you read, because you're seeing what other people are writing. You're getting informed by their writing. You're learning from what you're reading, from other people's writings. And so that's a kind of a given. That's like a requirement for a good writer, because if you're not a reader, then how do you expect to be able to write something that will be impressive for other people, that will be informative for other people, right? So even if you don't read books, but at least read the form that you write. If you write blogs, go and read a whole bunch of high quality blogs from other people. If you're writing short stories, go and read a whole bunch of short stories from other people. So inform yourself as a writer, because that's kind of like an input for you as a, for you to become a better writer. Then it comes to the more interesting parts, for which I'm going to do a screen share, which is here we are. So while we talked about compelling writing and compelling content, so in this context, we talked about focusing deeply and reading. The next thing we want to talk about is what is it that you reel your reader into your article with? How do you get the attention? How do you get the focus of your reader? And that's a combination of three things in a short form. First is headline, the second is the subheading, and then the third is the opening line. So they don't work in isolation, they work in a sequence. But the whole thing has to come together. The fourth thing that's also very important, if you're writing something which has a strong visual component, in a blog, it's a featured image. But the featured image is also a very strong example or element of what pulls your reader into your article, right? So if your headline is a poorly written headline, or you may or may not have a subheading, but if the subheading is also lame or it's hard to understand, or if the reader has to go back and read it twice to understand what is being said, then chances are they won't click on it. They won't really spend any time on it. Because how is the reader going to discover you? It's not in isolation. The reader doesn't go and come looking for Chetan Mahajan and say, okay, I want to read specifically the writing of Chetan Mahajan. The reader is more likely looking for answer to a question, right? So the reader might go into the internet and search for how do I make money from writing, okay? And if you type how do you make money from writing, the Google will throw up 10 search results, and you will choose to click on one or two of those search results. So what will you click on will depend on the credibility of the website, but it will largely depend on what shows up. And what shows up there? The headline will show up, and then the subheading will show up. So if you actually do a Google search for how to make money from writing, one of the top three search results will be the Himalayan Writing Retreat. It's an article written by Namrata, not by me, but it has a nice heading and a subheading, and that's the reason why you're likely to click on. So those are the things that you have to craft very carefully. If you take print as an example, you see something like this. The headline is Global Warming's Terrifying New Map. Okay. So what's it promising you? It's promising you insight. It's not necessarily a solution to a life problem, but it's promising you insight. And it's also telling you that through this insight, I will help you with a simpler understanding of this phenomenon. But when you read the subheading, it becomes even more important because it's just three simple numbers that add up to global catastrophe, and that makes clear who the real enemy is, right? So now you're going one step further and you're expressing specifically, you'll be able to understand who are the bad guys as far as global warming is concerned. Because with global warming, there are fewer good guys, right? So this is another example. So what is the combination that makes for a great headline, subheading, and opening? The first is that it has to grab attention. So global warming's new math is an easy one. Okay. Second is generating curiosity. It has to make you curious. If you're already interested in a particular topic, it has to make you curious and pull you into that. Promising a benefit is very important, because if there is a benefit that's promised, and the benefit doesn't necessarily mean change your life or help you earn millions of dollars. It could just be insight or knowledge or wisdom, right? That can be a benefit. And the last one, it doesn't always have to be specific. You can also have a non-specific headline, but it should not need deciphering. That's an important one, because if your headline needs deciphering, or if the reader has to go back and read it twice, then that is usually an issue. So you don't want to be in that space. It should be very simple and easy to understand. So another example of a great opening line, this is a personal favorite. I've often wondered what goes into a hot dog. Now I know, and I wish I hadn't. I think that's just such a beautiful headline to opening line to have in a paragraph, because if you're opening with that, irrespective of who you are, it'll make you curious to say, okay, what is there actually in a hot dog? If you're a vegetarian, then you'll wonder, what do these guys eat? If you're a non-vegetarian, you'll wonder, what do I eat? But it's something that promises insight. It makes you curious. It's got this slightly morbid promise where it's going to tell you what's inside your hot dog, but it's a promise nonetheless, right? Then you have, what is the actual content of a very compelling argument, right? And the answer for that is not something that is recent. That answer was actually 2,000 years old. It came from the logic that was presented by Aristotle, where he said that there is three components to a strong argument, and those are ethos, pathos, and logos. Now, what is ethos, pathos, and logos, and why do they make up a strong argument? So when Aristotle talked about these things, he was talking about it in the context of political debate. So you remember 2000 years ago, there wasn't that much writing going on. So it was more about discussion. It was more about how do you convince people on a particular idea, right? And for that, you have the ethos, pathos, and logos. Ethos is the credibility of the person saying things, right? Then pathos is the emotional content of your argument. So if you are, for example, arguing for a particular change in a law, right? That's a very clinical, legal kind of an argument. But if you start talking about human beings and how they will be impacted by a particular change of a law, then that suddenly becomes pathos, which means there is an emotional content to that particular argument. And then the last is the logos. Logos is the actual logic of the argument itself. So when you're saying that you want to argue, we could talk about CAA, for example, but it's a very highly political thing. So we try and stay away from politics. But if you were to take an example of what's the role of research in good writing. So the role of research is that it's giving your article credibility. If you're quoting 10 sources and you're saying, XYZ said this and a PhD in the field subject said this, that makes for a very strong argument. So, for example, you take an example of how do you get children or how do you get teenagers off their devices? Now, if that's a question that you ask yourself, then the ethos is first, who's the person who's telling you this? And then you say, I'm a published author, or I did a detox, or my phone usage is just 1 hour a day, and I was able to cut down. That will get you some credibility. Along with that, the credibility can come from a real research where you say that people who have cut down on phone usage have been able to do more creative work or have been more productive in school or have got better grades. So that becomes part of your ethos because you're being able to present credibility. The second is the pathos. So in your article, if you bring in a true story, you find a human subject and you tell the story of that human subject, saying, Ravi was a very, was addicted to gaming at the age of 16, and he almost failed in his class 11, but he made, ABC changes, and his parents worked with him, and he was actually able to get very good marks in class 12 or whatever other challenge you want to talk about. So that becomes a human story. That becomes a human connection that you bring into your article. And the last is the logic itself that you present. So the research is support to the logic, but the basic logic is what should you be doing? What is enough? What is not enough? So those three components together make for the most compelling arguments that you can present. So there is this conversation that I always have, or this question that I always ask about this. Sorry, my dog is getting into the YouTube chat as well. But the problem that I ask people is, what's the problem with book summaries, right? So you read a book summary and you get the gist of the book, but it doesn't stay with you. It doesn't really persist in your mind. And the reason for that is that in the book summary, what you've done is you've taken out the ethos, you've taken out the pathos, you've removed all the research, you've removed all the human stories, and you're only presenting the logic. So I understand the logic, but it's very dry. It's not very relatable. It's not very credible. And so the book summary then it works a lot less than reading the entire book. So that's if you look at it from a rhetoric perspective, that's the shortfall of using not using rhetoric properly in your art. Next, we'll come to humor. So when we're talking about humor, using humor well is a very, very powerful tool, because humor is again a way of making your reader take their guard down. If I'm seeing something which is funny, if I'm seeing, you tell somebody a joke, they're not going to get stiff and they're not going to behave, very closed. They'll open up to you because they're like, it's a humorous situation. So you just kind of let your guard down a little bit, but you have to be very sensitive in your use of humor. So if you're making fun of somebody, you're picking on somebody, like remember Trump did an imitation of a handicapped journalist, and that's a terrible thing to do because you're actually being a bully. So picking on somebody or picking a sensitive topic like politics or religion or sexuality, those should be off the table. The reason I didn't talk about CAA is the same reason. Okay, there was a really bad case where George Bush actually made a joke about weapons of mass destruction after they had invaded Iraq. Now, this is a scenario when people were dying in Iraq, right? People whom he had sent as the president of the US. And then you go and make jokes about something like that. That's just not considered to be in good taste. On the flip side of the same thing, there was a very interesting scenario where Ronald Reagan, when he was coming up for re-election, he was already quite old. He was asked, saying, you're like 20 years older than your than the other contender. So don't you think that you're in a you're you're kind of aging out and you're too old for this? And don't you think somebody younger should get this role? And Ronald Reagan, being the smart guy that he was, he turned it around and he said, yes, but at no point in my campaign will I hold the lack of experience and relative youth of my opponent against him. So that suddenly just changed the whole thing. It flipped it around, but it wasn't offensive. It wasn't negative or hurtful. So using self-deprecation is very comfortable. Using neutral subjects is very comfortable. Using very interesting juxtapositions can work very well in your favor. So one very nice one that I've come across was professional speakers, and this gentleman, his name is Senthil. He said that um, you know you should, when you getting into a stage or an audience, you should really know your audience, because if you don't know your audience, it's like starting a love letter by saying to whom it may concern, right? So it's a very interesting juxtaposition, but at the same time, it's harmless. It's not hurting anyone, but it's making the point very nicely. So that kind of humor is really what you want to try and shoot for when you're using humor in your own writing. So you have to know your reader, and writing for a reader which you don't know is like starting a love letter with to whom it may concern. So the same logic can apply to reading. The same logic can apply to a lot of different things. Now we come to the big bugbear, which I mentioned briefly earlier, which is, can great writing be SEO friendly? And I don't know how many people here are into blogging or understand the whole world of SEO, but SEO stands for search engine optimization, and it's used very widely for internet writing, where people will tell you, okay, these are the keywords that I'm going after, and this is the stuff that I'm going after. And there's a fundamental disconnect between SEO friendly writing and what is considered to be good writing in general. So good writing says you should have a catchy headline, but SEO will say your headline should have a number and it should have a keyword, right? Good writing should say there should be a great hook for an opening line. SEO friendly writing should say put your keyword in the opening line also. Similarly, good writing says don't keep repeating the same phrases over and over again. Keep it light, keep it friendly. And SEO friendly writing will say you have to repeat your keyword multiple times for Google to register that this is the keyword that we're looking. So how do you resolve this conflict? So you have to I think you still have to shoot for great writing, because at the end of the day, you can't just be writing for Google. You have to write for a real reader. And for that, if you have to sacrifice a few things which are SEO related, like tagging, repeating words too often, instead of that, if you can make up for it by tagging images and doing whatever else you can, hopefully that will also make for a better thing. So good writing is craft. SEO is science with some amount of guesswork. But great writing for the internet is really an art, because you have to then combine that craft and science, and you have to be able to, strike a balance between those two things. The most important thing that a lot of people don't realize is the value of editing. I see too much shoddy writing on the internet, and that's because people are in a hurry and they think I've said mainly what I wanted to say, so let me just put it out there. But the difference between a really nice, well written, well crafted article and something which is like, seems like it's just been shoved in the door is high quality editing. So if you take the topic of this particular headline, of this particular session, the 6 steps to writing more compelling content. So the most obvious thing is that more can go because there is a more built in. It's assumed. And it works just as well if you say 6 steps to writing compelling content. But when you look at 6 steps to writing compelling content, there's other things that can also go. So you can drop off writing. You can say 6 steps to compelling writing, right? So you look at the word count, it's gone from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's come down to only 5. 6 steps to compelling writing. Is there any loss in meaning? Not really. The meaning is still getting conveyed. You're still getting the same information across, but it's coming through in a lot less effort. And now what you can do is you can add a nice layer of information, which makes it even more pointed and even more specific. So you say 6 steps to compelling content, which is SEO friendly, right? So now you're adding even more value, and the reader also gets a proper expectation saying, okay, now this is more specific, more narrow, and I'm more interested. So editing is what can really make a difference. It can hold your reader, deliver more value. That's what you want to do. So that's what I have in terms of the slideshow, what I wanted to share with all of you. Now, if you want to pose any questions, if you have anything that you want to ask of me, we can talk about that. You can put them in the chat, or you could even ask me the questions. We can even talk about the questions. Okay. How does a travel blog work? So how does any blog work? Basically, how blogs work is you try and deconstruct what people are looking for, right? So you go into Google and you do your research and you figure out what are the questions people are asking, and then you provide the answers. But you provide the answers in such a way that your answers are able to rank for on Google. So that's how basically any blogging works. Now, travel blogging works the exact same way. There's no difference in the technology, but travel blogging is now not has over the years become a very, very competitive space. So if you want to start a blog and you want to blog about something related to travel, the general themes are already all taken, and there's a lot of content out there. So you'll have to work very, very hard to be able to rank for something like travel blogging. What you might want to do is pick something which is not so competitive. So, for example, when we at the Himalayan Writing Retreat got into the blogging space, we started by talking about uh, publishing, writing. For the first year or two, we were kind of clueless. Okay, we didn't really know. Then Sumit came, we started doing the blogging workshops, and we slowly learned from him, and we realized that we have to pick a niche and we have to pick a particular set of topics that we should be writing about. And so we decided, and when we looked at the writing, in general, there's a lot of information on writing, which is already available from many US-based websites mainly. So then it became a challenge saying, okay, how do I then stand out? And we realized that instead of trying to compete head on for writing, we wanted to pick the niche of writing and publishing in India. So when you look at most of our blog posts and most of our articles, they rank for writing and publishing in India. So that's really the main space that we try and go after. And similarly, if you have to write on travel, I would not talk about travel in general. You would pick something very narrow and specific. You could talk about travel for the single woman. You could travel. You could talk about travel in the Kumau Mountains. You could talk about treks in Kumau. You could talk about travel gear. So if you have something that you can sell through your blog, it's usually a more lucrative idea. So travel gear is much better because then you can also try and give a link to Amazon and try and make some money off of that. So it depends on the goal of your blog and whether it's a commercial or a personal blog. Next question from Shruti is, how do you write copy to increase followers on social media? How do you develop that skill writing that leads to conversion? And please, can you suggest some good writing courses online? Which type should one do, academic or business or professional writing? So I'm the wrong person to talk about social media. I'm actually terrible at social media. And Namrata handles all the social media for Himalayan Writing Retreat. So Namrata, maybe you should do a course on writing for social media. But suggest good writing courses on type that. Can you hear me still? You can hear me? Yeah, okay. Which type should one do, academic or business or professional writing? So that depends on what you're interested in. I mean, if you're writing because you want to make money, then maybe you should do a course which is more professional. If you just want to write a memoir or you want to write a book, then we have our creative writing course, which is also offered online. On our blog, again, if you Google and you say, writing courses in India, you'll find lots of information. British Council runs courses. We run courses. There's the Bangalore Writers Workshop where they run courses. So different courses are meant for different kinds of audiences. There is a company which also helps you on courses which are more related to employability, Henry something. So you have different kinds, and you'll have to choose, what your interest is and go from there. What would you do differently if you started your Unity blog again? It's not Unity, it's Uncity. I wouldn't do anything differently because Uncity was really inside out. It was personal expression. It was never meant to be commercial. I was not trying to make money. I was just trying to chronicle the journey of a family that leaves the city, moves to the mountains, and how you encounter different mindsets, and community is a completely different meaning, and how people are so different and the life experience is so different. So I wouldn't change anything. I'm very happy with that blog. I just stopped writing because I don't have much else to say. I mean, I've written 60, 70 pieces there. And I've summarized what that experience is, so I'm done. Um, should we have to write straight to the point content without storytelling in editing? I'm not sure I understand the question. Should we have to write straight to the point content? No, you can have storytelling, but you should tell your stories well. Editing is not saying that, don't tell stories. Even in nonfiction, there is a very important place that storytelling has, but you should tell them well. You should tell them with punch. You should tell them with brevity. You should tell them with a lot of impact. That's when people will find them interesting. If you are long-winded and slow and using a lot of cliches, then that makes it very boring for a reader. So that's what you have to avoid. So yeah, how do you reverse engineer someone else's article? Um, where did it go? Yeah, how do you reverse engineer someone else's article or content? You'll have to attend the blogging masterclass for that, because there's no easy way to do it. But you will. So I'll tell you the process that we follow. We use a tool called Uber Suggest, which is a paid tool. We look at keywords basically. We'd say, okay, something we looked at very recently um, was today morning. In fact, I was looking at it, and it is illustrations, book illustrations. Okay, book illustrators. And then I looked at, okay, which are the top 10 ranking pages, and then out of that I look at some of the weaker pages, and then I say, okay, I want to maybe knock this one out of the top 10, and I want to have Himalayan Writing Retreat in one of the top 3 slots. And so I'll then reverse engineer that page and see, is that page actually very good? How long is the page? How many times have they used that particular keyword? And what's the kind of value? So that's the Google side of things. But then you also say, what are the points that they're covering? And are they actually comprehensive when they're writing about that subject area or that topic? So that's the process that you follow to try and understand, or to kind of figure out for yourself what is it that you want to do. So there is a whole science to it, and you'll end up using a lot of tools, and then you have to understand or define for yourself. So when we say that, okay, I want to write an article on a particular piece, we'll also define a word length. We'll say how many times should the topic be repeated, and all of those kind of things have to come in. Only then we can have some idea of. And there is some guesswork in SEO. That's why I said it's not an exact science. But then you can try and go for that. But we do have the blogging masterclass coming up in April if you're interested. It only happens in the mountains. He doesn't do it online, which is counterintuitive. But anyway, yeah. How do I improve my writing and learn different styles? So there's lots of places to learn. If you're on a budget, you can go to Coursera, you can go to Udemy. If you're comfortable traveling, then you can come here and you can attend one of our workshops. Also, writing and learning different styles is not generic. Non-fiction writing, for example, is very different from narrative writing. Narrative could be non-fiction also. If you are writing a memoir or a biography, you're still telling a story. But deep work or Blink or Malcolm Gladwell kind of non-fiction writing or is very different from Arundhati Roy kind of writing. So it also depends on what it is that you want to learn. But there's a lot of courses out there. There's online courses, there's physical courses and workshops from many different places. So you can check them out and teach yourself. And of course, read. Reading is step number 1 to become a better. Nivedita has said, I'm not sure if this is relevant to this discussion, but I have some questions on ghostwriting. Would you have any tips on how to showcase this in our profiles? So we have 2 articles, or is it 1 article? 2 articles now. We have 2 articles. One is like on which one is answering the majority of your questions, and the second one is a list of ghostwriters in India. So you'll get answers to both of your questions there. It's like a snapshot of ghostwriting, um, and it's also a directory or a list of ghostwriters. So you can send us your information. We'll add you to that directory, and people will find you hopefully, and then you might get some gigs from there. Okay. Then the last is, how do I showcase my effort on this in my private profile to clients without breaching confidentiality? I don't know if we covered that in our blog. If we haven't, then we probably haven't researched it. So even I don't know the answer off the top of my head. But that's an interesting one for us to try and include in that blog post. So there's a request for you, Namrita, saying please do another masterclass on writing for social media. Okay, then we have, when you started the Himalayan Writing Retreat, did you plan it as a business from the start? Yes, I had to feed my family. So yes, I did plan it as a business. I would like to think of us as a social enterprise, because we work very closely with the Chirag School and we support this NGO through multiple efforts. Last year, we raised about 10 lakh rupees for them. It's an NGO run school which is down the road, and it's a beautiful school, very, very lovely school. So the nice thing is that even though it's a business, I'm able to pursue some of the goals that I have, because it's not a listed business and I don't have a boss. So I set my own priorities, but yes, it is definitely a business. Is there a recommended length or word count for a blog? So a minimum is usually 1,000 to 1,200, but there is no maximum really, because it depends on the competitive landscape. But what we have seen is that the longer the blog, the more it seems to rank. So one of our blogs, which is very, very successful, the one I told you, our number one blog is actually, how to earn money through writing in India. Namrita wrote that, but I think that's some 5,000 words or something like that, right? 6,000 words. So there is usually a correlation between, but it really depends on the landscape. If all the other blog posts about that are just, 500, 700 words, then you can write 1,000-word blog and it will probably rank. But if all the other blogs in that space are like 4,000 words, then you probably have to work harder to rank. That's pretty much it in terms of the questions, it seems. So great, thank you for your patience, and thanks for putting up with this whole little YouTube gaffe that we had. But it's been great talking to you. Check out our website. It's a lot of information and resources there for writers. Like the ghostwriting question, you'll find a lot of information. Literary agents, publishers, editors, beta readers. So there's lots and lots of information which is there. And if you go to the HimalayanWritingRetreat.com, there's a search bar on top. There you can enter your search query and you'll find the answers. And there is a whole bunch of programs that we're offering. There's a creative writing course. There's a nonfiction course. There is a blogging masterclass. So you can check those also out. And hopefully we'll meet face to face sometime. All right. So we'll call it quits then. Have a great night. I'll also get to my dinner. The fire is lit and it's nicely warm. So maybe I'll have a drink and then have dinner. All right. Good night.
Thank you. Thank you so much.